Hey, listeners, thanks for tuning into the podcast. I just want to take a moment to mention the podcast sponsor, retrogamestore.com.au. Head over there for all your Game Boy refurbish and repair needs. Screens, shells, buttons, and all the bits and pieces. And there's a complete custom build made to order service as well. Also, plenty more retro gaming goodness like video cables, display stand and power supplies, controllers, etc. And you can add the code PixelPie at checkout to get 10% off your order. Also, take a moment to say if you enjoyed this episode and haven't already, give it a subscribe or follow and a review where you can. And maybe you want to recommend the Pixel Pie podcast to anyone you know that would enjoy it. That'd be really appreciated. So thanks for listening, and now let's get on with the show.
Hi, I'm Matt Tecchio, and this is the Pixel Pie podcast.
G'day, Matt. How you doing, buddy?
Good, mate. How you doing yourself?
Oh, I'm doing really well. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on my humble little podcast here and let us get to know you a little bit more. You've got a lot of stuff that I would love to talk about. A lot of good console stuff. You know, you've got some Game Boy history, and you also dabble in a bit of Donkey Kong. So
yeah, look, it's a pleasure to be here, mate, and appreciate the invite.
No, that's all right. I heard you on the Played Up podcast with Sean and Neil and Mike, and I like to poach the talent where I can. So here you are. Now, look, I want to sort of start at the beginning of Little Matt, because you've got a lot of console history, a lot of love for just all gaming. You've spent some time in Japan, and I think people always love to hear about that. I certainly love to hear about it. If I can sort of live somewhat through other people's experiences, because I've had a taste, it helps. But we might sort of knock over the Donkey Kong thing, because I think as we speak at this moment, you currently sit 8th in the world. And I think that's a pretty big deal, because there's a lot of people out there. It might surprise some people. There's a lot of people out there having a crack at the old Donkey Kong. It's incredibly challenging. It's always being pushed. And you've been someone who has pushed it. You've been as high as 6th in the world. This is up there with like multi-marathon running and, you know, all this sort of cool stuff. So can you maybe just give us a bit of insight on that? And then we'll loop back around to the console stuff, because I really want to talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, sure. I mean, not to date when we have recorded this podcast, but today I believe is the 40th anniversary of Donkey Kong since it was released.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's what people tell me anyway.
Yep.
So when it comes to my history with Donkey Kong, I mean, I played it back when I was a young boy. Played it at an arcade, and my grandmother actually owned an arcade out in Melton in Victoria.
You're kidding me?
Yeah. No joke. But I didn't know her very well. Like, you know,
Right.
Two parts of family, and my family divorced. My mother and father divorced when I was young.
Okay.
And so my mother's side of the family, I didn't spend much time with. So, you know, you sort of get forced as a young kid. Oh, you got to go and spend some time with the other half of your family every now and then.
Yeah.
And so I, went away for a weekend off to Melton, and found out that my grandmother was running an arcade in Melton. So I went there and played a lot of games. And when I was at her house, she had a cocktail Donkey Kong sitting in her house.
Best grandmother ever.
I know, and I'm thinking to myself, you could have one of these in your house. Is this possible? How?
Yeah.
Anyways, I really enjoyed the game as a kid, but, you know, I played it and sort of moved on, you know?
Yeah.
And, we'll stick to the Donkey Kong. We'll fast forward. I'm just sitting down to watch, a movie or a TV show with my wife one night, maybe 5 years ago or something. Actually, it wouldn't even be that long. Would say about 3.5 years ago now.
Yeah.
And we watched King of Kong.
Yeah. The Billy Mitchell, Steve Wiebe kind of colossal affair and battle and so on.
Yeah, very entertaining. I
Very
mean,
much so.
you see the cast of characters, and when I say characters, I think most people in that mockumentary, whatever you want to call it,
Yep.
that historical artifact are characters. There's some really interesting people there. Walter Day, he's an interesting guy who has a historic place in competitive video game playing.
Yeah.
And I turned to my wife and I said, what's this 1 million points that they're going for? How hard can it be? How hard can it be? And
Famous
and
last
she
words.
just did the thing that a wife usually does to their husband and just goes, yeah, sure, honey, yeah, you could do that, sure.
Yeah.
I said, damn right I could, honey. So whenever she tells me I can't do something, it's a personal affront. So I thought, all right, I'm
going to give
it a shot.
You can't put the rubbish out, or you can't do the dishes.
She's tried that one on me, but it seems like that doesn't work for some reason.
Yeah.
So I thought, look, I'll give the game a shot, and I did, and I played it once, and I went, this game is stupid. This is hard, I said, maybe I'll just play Pac-Man. So I picked up Pac-Man instead. So I played that for maybe a month or two, and I got pretty good at it, right? And the thing I found is that it's really boring.
Right.
Like,
once you get those patterns down.
Yeah, it's pattern memorization, and it's just repeating that forever,
Yeah.
And so I'd get, I don't know, half an hour into a game or something, and then I'd make one small turn mistake,
Yeah.
Like I just wouldn't push the joystick in the right direction fast enough. And I went, no, I need a break from this. So I'm going to go try that Donkey Kong game again. So I did that, and
how were you playing all these games?
How was I playing them? I was playing them on a
on MAME or something?
a Hankin cocktail.
Right.
I went and bought one. I had we're going to really sort of loop back around here. So let's just say I really loved video games all my life, right? And having seen that my grandmother had an arcade machine in the house, I always said to myself growing up, one day when I get a job, I'm going to have an arcade machine in the house.
Beautiful.
And my arcade love as a teenager, and that was all around Street Fighter.
Right.
So I really wanted a Street Fighter machine or something to play Street Fighter on. So when I got my first job, I saved up some money and I bought a Namco Excelina. So it's one of those candy cabs. It's a red one. And I went down to like Zach's Amusements, which is one of the retailers for arcade machines in Australia. And they're still going strong, apparently.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, can you sell me one of these? And he said, of course I can. That's what I'm here for. Yes. So he said, I love arcade machines, and I started by going and just buying one, So if you come to me and say you want one, here you go. So I got myself an arcade machine. My wife had an arcade machine, strangely enough, when I met her.
What was the machine she had?
I just sort of accumulated. The one that she had?
Yeah.
It was a Street Fighter 2 machine.
No way.
There you go. It was like a Leisure and Allied Industries. Yeah.
I'm envisaging your wedding photos of like you two holding hands with your cabs either side of you, like up on a grassy knoll or something.
We did have a very elaborate cake that was Mario Brothers themed.
Right.
It had Peach and Mario in like the wedding and tuxedo, and at the top, and the whole thing around it was different levels of Mario. Like one layer was the underwater scene, one was underground, one
super romantic and nerdy.
And we did get married by Dexter the robot and what was his name? Greg Evans, the host of
Perfect Match.
Perfect Match. So
it's a bit of Aussie TV history that no one will understand except us oldies.
We're all too old. Yes. Yes. So I had a couple of arcade machines, and we accumulated a couple more. So I was playing it on a cocktail. Originally, Pac-Man I was playing on the Switch. There was a Namco collection.
Right.
But I was like, you can't, it's great to be able to play those things. And I love preservation through emulation and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm also a big fan of, why don't I just own the original,
Yeah, sure.
So I love both, and they both have their place.
Sure.
So playing Donkey Kong, and I thought, I'm going to play this, maybe every day when I come home, one game. Or 30 minutes before dinner, So I'd come home, I'd play the game, I'd go have dinner, and I'd go, well, that was great. And then what I noticed is the game started going longer and longer. I thought, oh, okay, this is interesting.
It's a thing
when
now.
When you're playing a game for a score, I think, and that you're constantly improving that score, it's a real It's a real fun experience, right? You see your improvement. It's a constant thing.
As long as you're improving. I mean, I have different feelings because my gaming skill in almost any game is unless it's kind of some sort of Pokemon RPG, is there's a bell curve where I pick it up and I kind of go up and I peak, and then I just get much, much worse and totally overthink it. For me, Donkey Kong, third level springs, I've been there a million times and it just kicks me in the nuts. And I've cracked that 100K once, but I'm always just short. So as long as you're progressing, it is great. But when you're not, it's a
difficult one. It's a difficult one. Out of all the games I've ever played, it's probably the hardest.
Yeah.
And, there have been times where I have wondered if I'd reached a plateau. And what I usually found is that if I just took a couple of days off and I stepped back, I would think to myself, hang on, I think I know how to improve.
Right.
I think I know.
Yeah.
And it could be this, that I was just watching someone else. Like, maybe you're sitting down, you watch The World's Best and you go, hang on, he does something a little bit different than me. Why is he doing that? And you work it backwards in your mind. And I mean, I literally at some point in my time, I sat down and I would play back The World's Number One with an arcade controller in my hand. And I would play the game in my head at the same time.
Right.
So I'd make all the movements that I would make.
Wow.
And I would go, okay, he went right when I went left.
Right.
Why did he go right?
Yeah.
And then I would try and play that 20 seconds over.
Have you seen that series Queen's Gambit?
Yes.
This is what they do. When she loses a match, she goes back to her room with her chess set and she replays the entire match. And even like when the Russian was winning and she hadn't played him, she'd go over and see the end state and go, I'm going to play every possibility backwards from that. Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, and so that's kind of what I did a lot of that for a while. I've gone through different methods of trying to improve or finding faults with my game. When you start, it's a lot easier. I just made a habit of recording my games. If I was playing on MAME or if I was playing on arcade, I would just record it. And then what I would do is I'd go back and I'd watch my deaths. And it's, just about 5 seconds worth of clip. And you can go, well, if I moved left or if I jumped or if I'd done whatever, I would have lived. And so you just plug that into your brain and you go, next time I'm here, this is what I do. And it's a different thing to be able to actually execute on that as opposed to, but I mean, at one point I was doing statistics on my own game. I was doing a statistics class for university.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they were showing me how to do all these things in analytics programs. So I started analyzing my deaths. This is how many happen on barrel boards and these levels and whatnot. And, graphed them and stuff and just went, well, here's where I need to focus on. These are the levels that are my problems.
Yeah. And Donkey Kong's
that didn't last long because I hate numbers.
Yeah, right. Donkey Kong has a lot of RNG, random number generator. And even though it's there's a lot of games that you can run through and you can pick it, you can jump here, bounce there, and you'll get it. But I guess that was where the difference between Pac-Man and, even though Pac-Man has a few free agents, the ghosts they vary in attitude and procedure. But Donkey Kong has that. And it's like you're saying, going back and watching and thinking, if only I paused. As soon as I put my foot over that pixel of the ladder, he gets grumpy, or I can come back, and just staying to. I remember there was an Australian that played for like Manchester United, soccer player back in the 80s, watching on 60 Minutes. And he was like, the only thing on the field that's perfect is the ball. It's round. Everything else is about increasing your chance of success. And Donkey Kong is 100% like that. It is all perfect. The stick's fine. The buttons are fine. You're actually in a pretty good position, but you got to kind of hedge it, get yourself in a position where you have a few options to get out. And when I watch you guys do it, I went to that Kong off a couple of years ago. These little weird double jumps off walls and this and that and the other and boink, boink. And there's a lot of twitch reflex stuff going on, but you had to be in it to bloody win it. And
I looked back recently. I recently went back and watched my first 1 million point game, and I was just disgusted at how badly I was playing.
Oh,
You know,
geez.
like it's
Such
like
a
you learn
chump.
to play the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally, I'm going, what an idiot. Like, what
Oh,
was I
man.
thinking? It's like you learn to play the game 5 or 6 times over, I think, you know.
Yeah.
I think you can, to a point, going back to what you said about Pac-Man and patterns, you can give people let me say that again. You give people a blueprint for how to run the
Success.
boards and
Yeah.
how to get to the end. And I've done that. I've made videos and I've given them to people. Some
Yeah.
people in our community here. There's a guy who's exceptionally good at Rygar, and his name's Jeff. And there's another guy who got 1 billion points at Nibbler, Michael. And
Yeah.
I gave them videos and I said, if you just follow these rules, you can get a kill screen.
Yeah.
And I watched them go from 0 points to 500, 600 points in maybe 2 months.
600,000.
Yeah. Not 600 points, but 600,000. Yeah, good point. And if you follow these blueprints and you stand in the right spots and you run the boards exactly as I say, you're going to get yourself to the end. But you're not going to get a great understanding of all the nuance to it, right?
And your
by the
technique
point you get, and by the point you get to where I'm at now, and there are people better than me.
Only
there is
only 7 though.
There's
only 7 people better than you in the whole world.
Well, hopefully by the time people listen to this podcast, I'll be at 5th place because I've
good.
come very close in the last 2 weeks multiple times.
What's the spread of points? Like, what's the highest and where are you sitting? And would you say, is it like when you watch, say, 2 athletes, I watch a lot of mountain biking and they're 2 seconds and the top 5 is 3 seconds across them. How close is that top 10? And what are the numbers?
The top 3 players are in a league of their own at the moment.
Right.
So the way I look at it is if you go back to all the, what's the word? The stature that the pedestal that they put 1 million points upon a couple of years ago, right?
We're talking like 5 or 10 or 20 years or?
Well, we'll say, okay, if we go back to 2012, so that's almost 10 years ago, right? The world record stood at 1.138 million points. So we'll just say 1.1, right?
Yeah.
That was an amazing score. And that score stood inside the top 10 until this year, until I knocked it out.
Right.
And when Billy Mitchell and Steve got 1 million points, it was a big deal, right?
Yeah.
But now there are almost 50 people with 1 million points. So it becomes a less
prestigious goal, I guess.
Prestigious, thank you.
Yeah.
Less prestigious thing. So if you looked at what 1 million was then, you'd say 1.1 million was that now, right? So the best of the best players are getting 1.1 million. Now, the difference between that 1.1 and that 1.38 is massive.
Right.
It is huge.
Right.
And I know it doesn't sound like it, right? It's a very small amount of points, but that point there is like a wall that people just don't pass.
Yeah.
Once you pass that wall, you pretty much end up at 1.2. So I'm at the point now where I can get a 1.2. I just haven't gotten it. Right? And that 1.2 is top tier. That is, top 5 players, right? Only 4 players I think have ever gotten 1.2. Maybe 5 now. I don't know.
So it's just because the game really, really ramps up. Is it more about the game's ramps, or is it more about the fatigue of having got there and then being able to sort of go that last round?
Whenever I asked one of those top players what the difference was, they'd really struggle to explain it to me. The best that they could do would be saying something along the lines of, it's the ability to find the points everywhere. And it is, because you have a finite end level and only so many seconds to get there, right?
Yeah.
So it is literally forcing the game to provide you maximum points. So there's a barrel on one side, there's a barrel somewhere else. The entire time I may be at the bottom of the board, but I'm watching these 8 barrels coming down and I'm trying to bring them all together and group them so that when I get to them, I get 500 points instead of 100 points, or 300 points.
For people
and you're constantly doing that.
Yeah, for people that don't know, and I have done this, and it is a sheer joy. At a certain point, you can steer the barrels. So
Yes.
I will explain it as a dimwit because then anybody that doesn't know what it means will understand it. I'm at the bottom of the screen. After a couple of levels, you're able to control the barrels. I'm at the bottom of the screen. As the barrel comes towards the ladder, it's coming from left to right. As I push towards that ladder, no matter what level I'm on, the barrel is going to come down that ladder, and I can start collecting them together. And A, I know where they are; they're not all over the show. And B, I can maximize my points. And I'm going to assume that is imperative in what you guys are doing.
It is. That's really important. Maximizing how many things you hit with the hammer at the bottom and at the
Yeah,
top,
yeah,
and when to get them so that you can hopefully get some of the firefoxes, which are the enemies within the level that move around,
yeah,
hit those at the same time. There are a lot of what they call point pressing
yeah,
moments
yeah,
in the
yeah,
game.
yeah,
And, when you start playing the game, your job is just to get to the end of it.
yeah,
Eventually you get to the end of it, you go, oh, well, now I want some more points.
yeah,
And as you get better and better, your desperation for those points
yeah,
and your frustration at willing those points into happening. So
yeah,
like you said, when you get to a certain point, it becomes very probable that you can steer those barrels, right? 3
yeah,
and 4
yeah,
chance.
yeah,
At the start of the game, it's very low chance. But from the moment you put the coin in and you press the button, you're trying to steer everything, right?
yeah,
And sometimes you'll try and steer something and it won't steer. Or sometimes you won't want it to steer
yeah,
and come down a ladder and it will just come down a ladder.
yeah,
And so you'll set up these elaborate things and they'll go wrong. And then it'll go wrong once, twice, 3 times in a row.
mm.
And in your brain, all you're thinking is,
Shit,
I
shit,
just
shit, shit,
lost
shit.
points. Yeah, come on, come on. What are you
Yeah,
doing?
yeah, and
Come on. I worked really hard for that and it
yeah,
didn't work out.
and like you said,
And you
talking
do
to
that
those
for,
guys that
yeah.
break that 1.1, this is the difference. They were able to keep it together, and things fell in their favor, and they found the points.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so much randomness to it, right? If you think about
Yeah,
the top 2 records in the world, there is 100 points difference,
man, that's
which
bonkers,
is
eh?
literally a jump of a barrel. Like
Yeah,
anything you can do, you can't get less than 100 points.
yeah,
So 117 levels full of random happenstance.
yeah. It happens,
And at
dance.
the
Yeah,
end of it, they come up with 1 point difference.
that's
That
insane.
is how far this game has been pushed by these legends who are so good at it.
Yeah,
It to me, it is the chess of arcade games. Like
yeah,
you said, harkening back to the Queen's Gambit, right?
yeah.
There are plenty of arcade games out there that have been completely broken. I hear that you can get max score on Karnov on the first level, right?
Right.
You can break apart these games, but a game like Donkey Kong, super hard. 40
Yeah.
years later, we're still trying to push it.
I would challenge anybody that thinks that we're talking rubbish to spend 20 minutes and watch yourself improve. Because if your goal is to be better at it, and like
Mm-hmm.
you said, and that was the advice I got coming away from that Kong off. I've got a cab at home which just runs on a Raspberry Pi. I got some nice sticks in it, so it emulates in some way an actual cab. One thing I found about a Donkey Kong cab is it's a bit short, and I find I got to kind of like stoop over it, or I've got to do like this weird
You need
like
a stool.
karate. That you do need a stool. My cab at home is a bit taller, but if your goal is to just get better, you just literally play the game for 20 minutes, half an hour, and just try and complete the boards.
Yeah.
And you
And I'm pretty
will.
sure someone said that games are meant to be fun, right?
That's
Games are meant
exactly
to be
right.
played for
There's
fun.
that too. There's
And
that
at
too.
some point, if it stops becoming fun and you're not doing it for a reason like a high score, stop playing it. Because
Yeah.
I've had points where, 6 months without getting a better score. And that's
Mm.
playing it 3 to 4 hours a day,
Oh
every
goodness.
day
That is hard
at
work.
like midnight. You're playing it at 2 a.m. in the morning and you're going, I got to go to work later. Why am I doing this? And you're not
Yeah.
improving your score.
Yeah.
And you literally, it can wear you down and you just keep asking yourself, you go, well, do you want this or not?
Yeah.
Do you want to be ordinary, or do you want to, for lack of a better word, be
Or you want to be
extraordinary? Do you
fifth
want
in
to
the
push
world?
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I watched a
And
few.
you go, well, I better.
Yeah, you do need to. I watched a few of your streams after Kong off, and um, it was clear, like from watching you there and all the other guys there, that this is something that I don't think I can achieve. I know I'm 48. I don't have the patience, the persistence. I don't have the Twitch skills, because at the end of the day, you will need some. You can't just outthink this game.
Nah. Donkey Kong is not a Twitch game, mate. I'll tell you that. I can
But
see what's happening in that game 6 seconds before it happens.
But that's the point. If you don't have this knowledge, then just relying on hand speed to react, because just when you bounce from something, he throws a rando and things like that. And if you're relying on Twitch, you're not going to nail it. But watching your streams and watching, there's times I just put it on here playing with my printer, or, fiddling around some other stuff, and I just run your stream on my other laptop. And to hear you swear and think, what's going on? And you've only got 20,000 for it. And you're like, that's it, I'm out of here. Oh, one more. I'm like,
my bad behavior. Yes.
Human,
I apologize for my bad behavior.
No, this is what people need to see. You can't just watch a mockumentary and think I'm doing it. Not everybody can do that, Matt. People need to see the real work that goes into it and understand that if you want it, there is nothing in this world that is achievable and awesome without giving it till midnight runs. And like you said, if you're playing till midnight and it's starting to shit you off, play something else.
I took long service leave, mate, and I played that game for my entire long service leave, trying to get 1.1 million points. Yeah, I think. And I got it on the last day before I went back to work. Actually, I got it on the Monday morning at 3 a.m.
Right.
And then I rocked up for work back from my long service leave.
How was your break? Exhausting.
It was, and my wife was like, "Why are you doing this with your leave?"
Remember us? Oh man, that's commitment.
I was during COVID, so it worked out well. But
I guess you were supposed to be at home anyway, so you're keeping the place safe. Look, that's amazing. But I guess this all had to start somewhere. Now, from what I understand, you have a lot of consoles, you have a lot of love for different gaming. You just are a gamer at heart. You've spent some time in Japan, and you're a dad and a husband. And I mean, a lot of people identify with everything I've just said in one way or another, if not multiple. Do you want to sort of maybe let's walk it back a bit to like little Matt and where all this sort of started? And we can kind of, we can just sort of hit, I'll just nudge him. We'll hit spots along the way. Where did little Matt become eventually a Donkey Kong addict?
Donkey Kong, or you want to start with video games?
No, from Donkey the beginning. Kong, back from the beginning.
Yeah.
How did we end
up?
I
was going to say, so I remember when my parents were still together. I was very young, would have been about 2, maybe 3.
You can remember 2 or 3.
I have a really good memory. There's something I don't really talk about it, but I have an exceptionally good long-term memory.
Right.
My short-term memory is garbage, but my long-term memory is great. And I remember being at home one day, and my dad and my mum come into the room, and they go, "Hey, we got this thing. We got to hook it up to the TV." And it was, I couldn't tell you what the name of the unit was or whatever, but it was basically a Pong machine. It had all these little switches on it that you could move up and down between soccer and tennis and all these things. But at the end of the day, it was all just Pong. Yeah,
that's right.
And I remember they hooked it up, and my sister was there. She was a little bit older than me, and we're playing it, and we're going, "This is fantastic, right?"
Yeah.
And then what happened later on is my mother brought home an Atari 2600. Now she never touched it, but she wanted it, and she brought it home.
Fair enough.
And I gravitated towards it. Space Invaders, and there's a game called Firefighter. I remember that one really well because it was one of the better looking games. Hero, Pitfall, things like that. And I would just, as a kid, when I guess I wasn't even at school age at that point, I would just spend my time playing it. So don't ask me what my parents were doing, but I was sitting in front of the TV, just playing the bejesus out of this Atari 2600, right? Yeah. Any game that I could get my hands on. And that lasted me a little while, but then my parents broke up, and I went and lived with my father. My mother took the Atari 2600 and vanished.
Yep.
And I was kind of video gameless for a very brief period of time. But I went over to a friend's house one day, and he had a Commodore 64.
Yeah.
And I remember going, wow, this is really interesting. I like this, and you've got some cool games, you know. I went home and said, hey, Dad, how about we get a Commodore 64? And for some reason he went, are you going to use it? All right, if you're going to use it, I'll get it for you because I'd like you to learn how to type and stuff
Awesome.
like that, you know.
Yeah, awesome.
So I got a Commodore 64, and you know, I remember playing a couple of games there, and you know, I'm sure I won't get arrested for it in 2021, but video games were very easy to pirate back in those
Yeah,
days. You know,
yeah,
you get
yeah,
a double cassette
yeah,
player or something like that,
yeah.
and
I
off
mean,
you go. And
I often wonder how like that kind of home PC market like in Europe survived, because everybody you talk to was like, it was just you bought all your games from a boot sale and everybody was just copying stuff. And it's like, and like I don't think people quite realize that, you know, when there was the big crash, like when Atari went down and there was the revival. Europe didn't experience it the same with the home computer
no,
market. The Speckies and the Amstrad and the Commodores and that,
hmm
they just kind of kept on trucking and they punched out. It's a bit like that's the sort of like the Hong Kong movies in the 70s. Like there was one every 3 weeks. They just kept putting games
yeah.
out and there was enough to go around. It's
Yeah, there was
astounding.
like a deluge of just titles constantly coming
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
And, you know, yeah, I remember as a kid, this would be a little bit older, but I would go down to the newsagents, you know, and you'd have your Zap 64 magazines or
yeah,
whatever magazines of the
yeah,
time, and they'd have a tape on the front of them. And you'd
yeah,
bring her home, you'd plug
yeah,
the tape into the
yeah.
C64, and you'd see what kind of shareware kind of games there
Yeah,
were.
it's so good, hey?
And it was a marvelous time. And I remember, you know, going to the stores, you know, you go to Kmart back in the day when they were a reasonable retailer, and they had a computer section, and
Yeah.
you know, you'd buy a game there, you'd bring it home, and you'd play Wonder Boy, or you'd play whatever game was coming out. There was just so many to choose from,
Mm,
and I spent way too much time playing that Commodore 64.
mm,
Way too much time.
mm.
And then from there, I got a NES for Christmas one day. My birthday is really close to Christmas. For anyone who wants to stalk my, you know, personal
Okay.
information,
Yeah, send me
it's
two
really
things.
close to Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so I got a the big pack, the big NES with the robot in it, which was useless, you know, but it
Robin,
came,
yeah. And
yeah,
probably
but it came with the zapper.
the shooter and stuff. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So Duck Hunt and Mario Brothers, and I really remember loving Mario Brothers. You know, it was like an
Yeah.
adventure. You're going left to right, and the levels keep going, and the graphics were great for the time. And then, you know, Mario 2, Mario 3, Mega Man, Ninja
Mm,
Gaiden, Gaiden, Ninja something.
yeah.
Um,
That really
you
bloody hard one.
know, yeah, the really hard one.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, I finished all those games. I finished Battletoads. I finished,
Wow.
you know, all these games as a kid. I reckon I was a better player back then than I am now.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, it's, I mean, the time's not as limited as is, and your head's
yeah.
just you're focused and stuff. Man, talking about all that stuff, all those like classic tough platformers, like it's no wonder that Donkey Kong became a thing for you, because you were kind of like
Ah,
you were training before you even knew what you were training for. At least, you know, like you're a dad, I'm a dad, and you watch your children and you see the little highways slowly get built, and the way that your
yep.
children start to develop and their sense of humors and stuff. And you're like, my daughter is like probably most kids, and she'll just sit there and draw for an hour or two and put something on the TV. Like my I don't know if I should say this, but my 10-year-old will watch like Big Bang Theory, and you know we watch The Office and things like that. You know, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but she would just sit there and do it, and you just don't know that down the road this is a
Yeah.
foundation that's being laid for something that may not be specifically artistic, but a freedom to think.
Yeah.
Um,
It's the building blocks of where it
Correct.
goes in the future.
And there's no doubt in
Uh,
my mind that those years of destroying Ninja Gaiden prepared you for the Donkey Kong Wars.
yeah. There's two things I have going in my favor. One is I'm a firm believer that I should be able to do anything. You know,
Yep.
like we're all born with a blank slate,
Yep.
right? You know, if one person goes and becomes an architect and the other person goes and becomes an artist, right?
Yep.
It's the paths that they've chosen because of whatever reason, whether it be societal or something built into them, you know, into their DNA.
Yeah.
But you know, we all have things that we're better at than other things. You know, we're all gifted in certain ways.
Yeah.
But you should be able, if you apply yourself to something hard enough and long enough, should be able to accomplish it. And I believe that. And the other thing I have going in my favor is I'm stubborn.
Right.
Like my gift is how stubborn I am. And it's,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's a blessing and a curse, but I just don't give in. Like
That's awesome.
I refuse. But yeah, playing all those games as a kid, I really enjoyed going into those worlds. You know, I was a very imaginative kid, right? A bit of a dreamer. You know, so I wasn't interested in what am I going to do as a career when I get older, or you know, am I applying myself at school or anything like that? No, I'm like, I just want to play these games and have fun. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, this week I saved the world in Dragon Quest, or
Yeah,
you know,
wicked.
I saved the princess and killed all the ninjas and all this kind of stuff, and it was a great escape.
Yeah.
And I used to read a lot. I used to watch a lot of movies. Still do most of that except for the reading. Got lazy.
Yeah. Me too.
There's not enough time.
I've got audiobooks. Why should I read? I can do and do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've got podcasts now anyway, and they're infinitely more rewarding.
Yeah.
So yeah, from the NES, there was like, well, I can see that there's another side of the world that I'm not in, so I need to get like a Master System or something, you know. So you go and get a Master System, and then they release a Super Nintendo and a Genesis or a Mega Drive, and you just start accumulating all these things because I don't want to miss out. And it's like you hear people nowadays, you read forums and stuff like that, and people like, oh, Xbox sucks or PlayStation sucks, and I'm like, why can't we just enjoy everything, guys?
Yeah, that's
like,
right. That's
I realize, you know, we may not be able to afford everything or whatever, but it doesn't make one thing less valid or less entertaining and worthy than another.
It's a buffet.
So fanboyism sucks.
it's a buffet. Just have a taste. You never know. You might like it.
Yeah. It's not like someone's trying to feed you poison.
No,
it's like someone saying, hey, check out, you know, what does it matter whether I play Resistance or Halo? You know, play both. I don't know. See what you like.
And the annoying part is often you weren't even talking to them. They decided to interject in your conversation and tell you. It's like, cool, mate, I'm just going to walk over here now.
Cool story, bro.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So at what point did you start, like, I guess, collecting, I guess? I mean, are you the sort of person that everything you bought was to play, and then at some point you became an adult and you're like, now I just want to have things because of the nostalgia and move through that part of it? When did that sort of happen?
So I think originally I just bought things to play them, right? And then eventually I ended up with, and this is a good thing, right? I ended up with a lot of disposable income through work, right? I was a single guy and had some money coming in. And it was like, well, every week now I'm just going to buy a new game and play a new game or two games or something like that, right? It's a great position to be in. So I just started accumulating things, and you know, some things had more of a sentimental value than others. So you know, there were game series there were games and series that I enjoyed more than others, right, over time. So you know, as you get older, you've played more Zelda games, or you've played more Mario games, or you've played all of these games from a particular series, Final Fantasy or whatever. So those franchises become a little bit stronger to you. So you start thinking, well, I don't need a life-size Link statue, but maybe I'll buy it because it's on eBay.
Did you buy a life-size Link statue?
I did at one point in my life. I don't have it anymore.
Oh man, that's
no. I sold it to a lady who got it apparently as a what they call the push present. I didn't realize this thing existed, but apparently when you have a baby, you can ask for a push present in certain circumstances. So her husband bought it for her to put in their library.
Do you have any photos on your Instagram of it? Or is this
no, but I do have photos of it still.
You need to pop those up. That's crazy.
If you just go to Google, I think they created 8 of them worldwide. If you just go to Google and you type in Twilight Princess life-size Link,
that's incredible.
You'll find a picture of it. It was made of fiberglass, and basically it was a prize here in Australia.
Okay.
For one of the first people who purchased Twilight Princess when it launched. And they won the statue, and I believe there was one of them actually in the Nintendo World Store.
Right.
So I think they were created in Germany, and fiberglass Link. He was taller than me, and I had one for a brief period of time, and I remember it just sat in a, room in my house. And yeah, at some point I was like, nope, I really got to make a lifestyle choice here. Do I really need this? Should I join some convention and wear Klingon uniforms or something, or should I just
That's deep.
should I just become a normal human being? And I went, I think I'll be a normal human being. So I got rid of that, and so things like that, collectibles. I would buy. Like, I've got some strange things. Like, I've got a prototype of Contra 3 laying around somewhere.
Right.
So when Contra was brought to the European regions, they turned them into robots,
Probotector,
and they called them Probotector. Yeah. So I've got a PAL version of Contra that, I think it's PAL. See, I'm very confused now. A PAL version of Contra that is actually Contra and not Probotector.
Right.
I have no idea how that got out into the market, but you can tell it was a testing one.
Right.
My wife tells me that they would often make a limited run of prototypes and give them to people working at Nintendo to test and play and market test, So I'm assuming that's what it is, because on the back of it, it had a sticker saying Ian's version or something.
Oh, that's crazy.
Ian, whoever you are.
Yeah, that Contra thing's interesting, because I've got, I think maybe on Mega Drive, because I run mostly EverDrives. So I've got I've got Contra, so for the West, Contra from Japan, and then Probotector. But then I've also got because when they went from Japan to America, to the West, they kind of took away some of the health, but didn't make it quite as hard or something like that, dialed it back. But then I've got a ROM on that EverDrive, which is the original Japanese version. So it's kind of the way it should be, but just English patched.
Yeah.
That's probably the most purest way to play the original version without having to speak Japanese. That's probably a similar sort of situation, but on a legit card. Holy cow.
Yeah, so little things like that, random stuff, a couple of unwritten GD-ROM discs for the Dreamcast, with nothing on them. You can probably still buy those. They probably produced 1 million and never used them. But yeah, so I would collect things that I thought were interesting pieces that I may want in my house. I'm trying to think just off the top of my head.
I can still be coming from. Right now. I mean, mid last year, I saw for sale on Gumtree, pretty cheap, around $40, was what seemed to be a pretty good condition ET for Atari 2600. And I was like, I don't own a 2600. It might be a console I'll pick up if I see it at a garage sale or something cheap enough. And I'm like, yeah, I'll pick it up, because people are asking well over $200 for one, which is probably fair. It's probably fair, but I don't have the space and stuff. But I was like, and regardless of what people want to believe about, did ET kill consoles? You can go either way. I think there's a lot more to it than that. It still, to me, is one of those things that I would just like to have, because a whole bunch of them got buried in a hole for whatever reason, which kind of elevates them to this kind of
history,
holy talisman of retro gaming. So I understand exactly where you're coming from by just having things, because they're kind of this little point in time.
And I've created a bit of a backlog for myself. For example, I own a copy of Panzer Dragoon Saga, which apparently goes for a fair bit of money nowadays, right? Yeah. I actually haven't played it, but it's on my list of things to do when I retire.
That's fine. That's fine.
So
on Dreamcast?
You collect things. No, that was for the Saturn. I think it was for the Saturn.
Yeah.
It's one of the long boxes, so I think
Saturn.
It's a Saturn.
Yeah, Saturn. Yeah.
And I have a Saturn, and a whole bunch of, back when the Saturn had the best versions of Street Fighter Alpha 2 and 3 and whatnot, I bought those. And nowadays you just buy an FPGA and play those Capcom arcade games perfectly. Times change and games become either more accessible or less accessible. And I really do believe in preservation of video games, by whatever means necessary. I would prefer the companies preserve them and allow you to continue to play them. But if you think about how many games are made nowadays and how much DLC and all these bits and pieces, I haven't pirated a game in 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, when I was a little kid, sure, I didn't know the ethics of it all or
No,
whatever.
no.
Right?
What, this is free? Oh yeah, hook me
Yeah,
up.
exactly. Great.
Yeah.
But I honestly believe you love something, you should support it. You should purchase it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a crazy person. I've purchased certain games multiple times for whatever re-releases and whatnot,
Yeah.
because I'm a crazy person. But I do believe that preservation is really important, because you ask me, how did I come to play these games today?
Yeah.
And I say to you, well, it's because I had an NES and I played Mario Brothers, right? But some other person may answer with, I really enjoyed that because I enjoyed playing, Kaze no something or other that was a very limited release game that, not many people got to play. And if that game is important to someone when they're 12, I feel like they should have the opportunity to go back and play that when they're 40.
Yeah.
Or they should be able to say to their partner or their friends, hey, check this game out. It's got something really interesting about it,
Yeah. Or you sit with your children. Like, it is, even though I didn't have a retro gaming kind of, or like a gaming childhood, it is still great to sit with my daughter. And like when we went into lockdown here, and I dragged the big Trinitron out and we played Super Mario, and to see my daughter and my wife, my wife blows me away because, yeah, look at that guy. My wife blows me away because every now and then I'll put something on and she'll be like, oh yeah. And she can just like crush these like Super Mario levels. When I first built my cab, she's like, have you got Wonder Boy? I'm like, you mean like the dude in the skateboard? And I was aware of it. She goes, yeah. I said, I think so. And she gets on and just like 400K. Just,
yep.
And I was like, what just happened? And she goes, oh, well, my wife grew up in the roller skating scene. And at like all the, at the links or the rinks was like Wonder Boy. And
yep.
She still had it there from way back. And I was just, when I see that happen, and she's like, whoa, that was so good. I mean, she's mid-30s and gorgeous. And I'm like, it's so good to just see her go back to that childhood. And
it's beautiful.
For like 2 weeks, she was like, can you turn it on for me? And we just watched Neil Cairns had got the world record, and we were doing stuff with One Up here, and that was the game of the month. But that's the prime situation where you see someone happy from preservation. Without that preservation, without that emulation, that ROM, that experience becomes a figment of their imagination and a memory. I 100% agree.
And I mean, it's easier with some things. Like I remember going back to what we were saying before. I got a SNES and I got a Mega Drive, and then I made sure I got myself a new computer. I got a 286 and then a 386 and a 486. And it's easier to go back and play Doom or something like that on a PC because, it just works still. It's amazing. Kudos to the brilliant people either at Microsoft or whoever is, putting out these operating systems that you can still play these games from 25, 30 years ago. If I wanted to play Jazz Jackrabbit or something, there's services that I can pay to do that. And, whether it be Steam or good old games or whatever, but the same can't be said for some of these more esoteric games or companies that went out of business, and that's kind of sad. But I think at some point, again, going back to talking about collecting games, by the end of the 360, if you're buying 2 games a week or whatever, I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of 360 games.
Right.
And I had to look at it at one point because I had a whole bookshelf of them.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, how many of these mean anything to me? How many am I going to go back to? And, I looked at it and I went, oh, yeah, Mass Effect, I'm going to keep that. Halo, I'm going to keep that. And I went through, and anything that I saw that I just thought, why does this exist? Did I buy this just to get achievements or something?
Yeah.
I pulled it out, and with my wife's help, we went through eBay and we just listed them all and we sold them all. And I must have sold over 200 games for that thing. Right. And I still have a bookshelf of them,
Right.
Or maybe not a bookshelf, half a bookshelf now of 360 games.
Is there any you kick yourself a little bit and go, well, if I had hung on that for 6 months, I would have tripled?
No, I don't think so. I think it's very easy to tell the ones that you don't need. Occasionally I'll hold on to a game for the laughs,
Right, because it's just
like
so
I went
terrible.
through the list and I kept a copy of 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. It's not a great game, but I said, how does this exist?
Yeah,
I'm going to keep this. How does this exist? And for the Wii, there was a game called Ninja Bread Man. Right? Ninja Bread
Bread.
Man. Of
That
all
sounds
things, I saw it on the
awesome.
shelf one day and it was like $80 and I bought it because the name made me laugh. And I looked on the back and I said, this, I've never played it. I looked at it, I said, Ninja Bread Man. All right, this is dumb. I bought
Yeah.
it. It's still sitting there in my collection because I just refuse to let it go. It's probably
Wow.
worth $3, you know?
Yeah, it's that's unreal. Ninja. I'm gonna have to look that up actually because my Wii's pretty handy. Um, yeah, right. So you obviously own a bunch of like consoles. Did you have a period like with handhelds like Game Boys and PSPs and things like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh man. The first time I saw someone bring a Game Boy to school, that was a
Right.
holy moment.
Really, really.
The sun shone down
Wow.
upon this other kid who
Because
had
it
something
had
that I
to,
didn't
otherwise you
have.
couldn't see the screen.
Absolutely. And he had Tetris and he
Yeah,
had the original Mario for the Game Boy.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm like, the thing kind of looks like shit, but this is cool, man. You get
yeah,
to,
yeah.
excuse my language. I
No,
don't know
no,
if I can swear on
no,
this
that's fine.
podcast,
That's
but
fine.
that's as bad as it'll get. And I thought, this is great. And I came home and I said to my dad, can I get a Game Boy? And he said, absolutely not.
Oh no.
You've got a Nintendo, play that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a portable console. I'd had those Tiger Electronics games.
Yep.
Oof. And I remember playing the Ninja Turtles one of that to death, but I didn't have one of those Game Boys until the Game Boy Advance.
Right.
And there's a good story behind me purchasing the Game Boy
Let's hear
Advance.
it. Let's hear
All
it.
right. I got in my car and I went to university one day. All right. On the way to university, I drove past the Target and I looked at it and went, I've got enough money to buy a Game Boy. So what I did instead of going to university that day is I drove to the Target.
Yeah.
I bought the Game Boy and I bought two games for it. The Super Mario Brothers 2
Right.
and what they call Super Mario USA now or whatever. And I bought Castlevania. No, it wasn't Symphony. Maybe it was Aria of, I don't know. It was
Aria of Sorrow,
Circle of the
maybe.
Moon. It was
Oh,
Circle of the
right.
Moon. There you go.
Yeah.
And it was whichever one you couldn't see because the thing wasn't backlit.
Yeah,
And
so dark.
and I
Yeah.
drove back to uni with full intentions of doing my classes that day, and
Yep.
instead I sat in the parking lot and I played the Game Boy for about 4 hours,
Oh my
and then I turned the
goodness.
car back and I drove home.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
I remember going, why did they put these extra sounds in the Mario Brothers thing? It's really annoying that they keep talking. But I just loved it. And from that point on, I bought all these other Game Boy games. And then when the SP came out, the clamshell one,
Yeah.
that was a fantastic handheld
Especially
version.
get the 101 with the nicer screen and
Yes, it
game
was so
changer.
good. And I still have it laying around, and I often think maybe I should get it backlit. I like get one of the modded ones for it
Yeah.
because I think it was backlit, but it wasn't, a modern LCD. I thought, what if I just put one in there? And I thought, how often are you going to play it? But there's some amazing games like, is it Metroid Zero Mission?
Zero Mission was I tried to play like the SNES because it's like NES, and then Zero Mission was the remake, and
Yes.
then
Fusion was there as well.
Yeah, and then Fusion. Oh, then Samus Return for 3DS was the SNES remake sort of thing.
Yes.
And I played Zero Mission like when I sort of stuck in a few years ago. I finished it last year. I was like, just such a wonderful experience. And without like an LCD, there's no way I could play a Game Boy. Like I've got a bunch of really nice originals, and they kind of have to sit outside like with a lot of light. I just don't know how people did it, and it's a testament to the ergonomics, the aesthetics, the world, the operating environment that the Game Boy had to make everybody see through its flaws and go, don't care.
Yeah, and the same thing with the DS. When you bought that first DS, it was a chunky little device. It wasn't a good-looking console.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot of games for it. You're thinking, wow, I got this stylus and stuff like that. And then you've got the PSP. I remember importing a PSP from Japan, right, to get it early.
Yeah.
And I'm playing the two side by side. And the PSP is blowing my mind with the visuals.
I think it's OLED,
but the DS
is the PSP.
No, the PSP was just normal LED at
Right.
first. The Vita was OLED.
Right.
But it still looked a lot better. It was like almost like a console, like between a PS1 and a PS2 kind of thing. I'm playing Ridge Racer, and I'm like, this is amazing. about 2 weeks into it, though, I'm going, but I'd rather play this on my TV. And I've got the DS and I'm playing these really nifty things that I can't really play anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing, like, they're doing all that attitude marketing in the marketplace. I see a bus go past and it's like, buy the PSP, you don't need a childlike, stylus pen or whatever, and stuff like that. I'm like,
whatever,
mate, let's not play these games. Let's just enjoy everything for what it is. There's good games on the PSP and there's good games on the DS. And it just felt like this was before mobile phones were, taking over the world. This is great. I've got something good in my hands.
Yeah.
And then the Vita. The Vita is a great device. The 3DS, God knows how many of those models I have laying around. They put out revisions of that all the time.
Yeah.
So I love handheld gaming.
Yeah.
I don't do enough of it nowadays. Obviously, the Switch is a hybrid, and I love my Switch. But I just have so many fond memories, especially of the DS. The Castlevania games on the DS I thought were great. They were brilliant. I was just trying to think off the top of my head what other games. They re-released a lot of SNES games for the DS, and they were great to have on the go.
Yeah, was it like the like Super Mario 3D on the DS?
Yeah, that was on the DS.
That works really well, like being able to use like the shoulders to move the camera around, and it's that next step up, and it's like you're playing it on the bus. Or like
exactly
during your lunch break. Like I've played that a bit during my lunch break. It's really amazing. Yep. Yeah. You mentioned a little bit before about importing from Japan. Now I know that you've been to Japan. I asked you if you'd been once or twice, and you said you've been 8 times. And that's freaking awesome. Anybody that listens regularly would know that I've been, and I'll take any opportunity to bring it up. Went for a few weeks, 2018 with my wife and daughter. I love hearing about other people's experiences in Japan because I can still smell it. I could still hear it a little bit. And it always helps to sort of vicariously experience other people's times there. So you said your last trip was cancelled due to COVID, but up until then, you're a fairly regular visitor. So maybe just give us a bit of understanding as to, obviously gaming's a big part of why you go to Japan.
Yep.
Yeah, what takes you to Japan, and why do you keep going back? And
I guess growing up, gaming, a lot of the games I liked came out of Japan. And you'd hear these stories about, if you go to Japan, there's arcades everywhere. And, you can go to this one place and it's full of games and they're relatively cheap and all this kind of stuff. And I always thought, growing up, I liked anime and things like that because I was a bit of a nerd. It's like, well, if I ever get the opportunity to go to Japan, I'd love to go to Japan. And the first time I went there was actually quite funny, is that my father was going there. And he said, hey, you've always wanted to go to Japan, haven't you? I'm going with a whole bunch of my mates, and they were going for some horse racing thing.
Right.
And he goes, well, I can get you in on this trip relatively cheap.
How old were you then?
I was actually quite old. I was maybe like 16, I think.
Quite old, yeah. But relative to
I think I was 16, 17, 18, somewhere in that range, right?
Old enough to kind of wander around on your own and be a bit autonomous.
Not to need adult supervision. He said, look, you come over, we just add you onto the package. So you get the flights and the accommodation. Right. We go off and do our thing. You go off and do your thing. All right. Yeah. So I only saw him like for breakfast every couple of mornings.
So good.
So I had a room to myself, a tiny little room, and I had about a week. It was a very short amount of time, right? But I didn't know any Japanese at the time. Yeah. So I'm trying to cram Japanese into my brain. Just the simple stuff. Thank you, goodbye, where's the train station? Things like that. Yeah. I get over there and they go off and do their thing. And I remember the first day going, I know I've got to go to this place called Akihabara. Yeah. I've got to go there. Okay. I'm going to go down to the train station. I'm going to get myself there. I'm just going to see. I'm going to walk around because I didn't know what I was doing. And the internet wasn't what it was now back then.
When we went in 2018, I used Google Translate and Google Maps, and we went wherever we wanted. And if I needed to find the crayfish shop, I just typed it in. And so I said to the dude, excuse me, that. And he's like, follow me, buddy.
So no mobile phone, right? Yeah. I'm just there. I think I may have figured out before I left, I might have printed out some maps or something, and I go down there And luckily enough, at the train station, one of the maps on the wall had English, right? They had the Japanese one, but they had an English one. I went, all right, there's a number, so that must be how much it costs.
Yeah,
You know, and I figured it all out, and I got there, and I walked down this main street as soon as I get out of the train station, and there's this big building, maybe 10 stories, 12 stories high, and all it had on the front of it was whatever video game it was at the time. It's like a PlayStation 2 game or something being advertised. And I went, they advertise video games in public here? What the heck?
Yeah.
And
like
I'm walking down the street.
And
And I'm walking down the street and I'm looking left and right. And all these stores are selling games. And if they're not selling games, they're selling figurines, models and stuff like that. And I think I spent the entire day, I didn't see, 10% of the place because I'm going into every single place and I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
And I'm going through and I'm going, this NES cartridge is $1. Do I need this NES cartridge?
Yeah.
Probably not, but it's $1.
That's right.
Let's find Mega Man. Let's find Mega Man 2. Let's find Mega Man 3. Let's find Mega Man 4, And at some point, I'm just looking around at all these things that you can get. And I'm just pulling out, cartridges
look galore, at them.
And putting them in my bag and a little backpack. And I remember getting back to the hotel and going, how much can I fit into my suitcase here? Because I know when I went over, I specifically packed really light.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm going to buy stuff. And I remember I walked through and they had Neo Geos, like the AES models, for like $70 at that time.
Oh man!
Nobody was buying them.
Did you get one?
I didn't buy one, and I really regret it.
No.
But I bought a Super Famicom, and it was like $10, and it looked like it was in great condition. And I bought a Japanese Mega Drive, and that would have been like $10, and all this stuff. And I just packed it into a suitcase, and I'm throwing the controllers in the bin. I'm like, I don't need another controller for this. I've got controllers or whatever. I just need to maximize my space, maximize the space. And so I even remember I knew that there was a friend of mine living in Japan. And she said, if you get over here, let me know. And I'll take you down to Osaka. We'll go to Denden Town and we'll check out the electric town down there.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I'd made a day trip down there. And I remember that we spent so much time down there that I couldn't get a train ticket back that night.
Last train.
So we had to stay there that day. Yeah. Got stranded in Osaka. And Osaka's probably my favorite place in Japan.
Right.
That and Hiroshima. They're both beautiful.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it from a gaming point of view. And that's why I went there originally. As I got older, and I made some additional trips, especially once my wife and I got together. Yeah. There was incentive to go and see things other than just video games, although she was into that kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
So we would go and we went to Nara, and you see the deers walking around, and you go through all the temples. And it's really just interesting how you can go from one place, which is all about high-tech stuff, and then you go, one suburb or prefecture away, and you're just in a place full of temples. And what I really love that they do is that they theme things. So this town is known for its, video games. This town is known for its artistry and, and everything seems to have its place. And there's so much of it. And there's such a nice mix of old and new. And the food is amazing. Food is relatively cheap. People talk about Japan being expensive. I don't know where that theory came from, because Australia's bloody expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Depends on what you're looking for. I agree with you with that. Like, each space seems to be very much specific about the space. Like, we were at I can't remember what the station we got, but it's like where Takashita Street is. And then across, it's just like this big long street of markets and stalls and stores. And I had a 7-year-old daughter, and it's all about squishies and this and that and the other and blah, blah, blah. And then just across the street is the Meiji Shrine. And this is like as big as the largest botanical gardens that we would have here in Australia. And you only walk like 500 to 600 meters in, and you look up and there's no city. And for all you know, you're in the middle of this forbidden forest. Yes, you're surrounded by people. And then you saw, when you come back out, you walk around the corner, you're like, oh, and there's that over there, and that is 100% doing what it does. Yeah, that blew us away the most. It's just when they're doing something, they're doing it.
Yes.
They're just
It's like,
doing
yeah,
it.
in Ueno Park, for example, the park is beautiful, and during the sakura blossom time, especially, they hold a lot of things there. You can go
Yeah,
and eat and drink and have a great time.
yeah.
But then if you just continue walking on, 500 meters beyond it, suddenly you're in a place where it's something themed completely different. Um, and yeah, you can just go from place to place to place,
Yeah.
and they invest so much into whatever it is that they do there. That's
So
their
you went.
thing.
So you went
Mm.
back several times, obviously with your wife, and then again, just from your Instagram, it looks like you've been back with your son. You like you
That's a
guys.
funny one.
There's a picture there of you guys watching the Pikachu movie in Japan, and just like to take
Oh no,
kids.
the Pikachu was before we left. The
Oh,
Pikachu
was
was
it? Oh,
before we left.
okay.
Yeah,
But you did take your son to Japan, right? Because there's pictures of him like with the
yeah,
train conductors and things like
yeah.
that.
And he
Now,
did go to a live Pikachu pantomime and stuff
oh,
like that. And one of his favorite, kids grow up and they're really little. They have things that they enjoy, whether it be Teletubbies or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, my son really loved this thing called Unpan Man. And Unpan Man is this Japanese children's character. And his head's made of bread or something, like his baked head.
All right,
Anyways, it's really popular in Japan, and it's been popular for like 30 years or something, right?
right,
And because the first time my son went to Japan was when he was 6 months old.
right.
So we bought him these kids things, and they were Anpanman. And so when he grew up, he's like, "Oh, Anpanman." So when we
Yeah,
went back the second time, we found out there was an Anpanman Children's Museum, you
right.
know. And as you're walking to this museum, I think it was in Yokohama,
Yeah.
you're walking to, and they've got these statues of all the characters, life-size
Oh
statues on the
man, must
streets,
have blown
and he's
his
going up and he's
mind.
hugging them.
Yeah,
And he's hugging them, and he's like, "Oh, that's the bad man," and there's
yeah.
we take him in, and they do a pantomime and stuff like this,
Uh,
and it's like, I'm glad my son got to experience. He would never have figured out who Unpan Man was if he'd stayed,
no,
in
no.
Australia or
Yeah.
whatever. But 6 months old was the first time we went over there with him, and I remember losing his luggage. I
Oh,
left it at the airport when we got there.
you left it behind.
I left it behind. So we got it was 2 a.m. when we got in,
Oh
and all
man.
his food and formula and stuff was in that
Oh bugger.
suitcase.
Did you get it back?
So I had to write a letter to the harbour master apologizing for my, disgraceful behavior
Fair income.
and ask for my luggage back.
Fair income.
Yeah, they were always going to give it, but it's this thing that
That's
you've
the
got to go
process.
through. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
process. They give you the thing and it's formatted already to say the apology and whatnot, and you just sign it at the
Right.
bottom. But
Yeah.
it's a formal letter of apology to the harbour master
Mm.
for doing it. But yes, I did get it back.
Going back to that kind of like doing everything the right way. When we were there, we went sort of like Osaka, Tokyo. Then we went out of Tokyo up into Izawa, out into the snow for like 3 or 4 days. And then we're
Yep.
catching the train back into Tokyo. And so we're waiting for the Shinkansen to pull up. And there's actually, as we think we're like running a bit late. So we run up and there's a train waiting. And I'm sort of looking up and being like kind of freaked out, Dad. The itinerary's on me. Come on, we're going on this train, my wife, me, my daughter. And I kind of went to step across the line to head to the train. And there's this Japanese guy in the uniform, probably around 65, 70. And he had this stick. And he turned on me and he's like, basically said, cross that line. I'm going to hit you with the stick. Step back now, sir. And I was like, being like arrogant kind of Aussie. I'm like, dude, this is my train. I can't afford to miss it. And he's just like, last warning. And I'm like, all right, we've missed our train. So I stepped back. The train took off. As soon as the train left the station, he kind of dropped his shoulders. He turned to me and he basically sort of said, how are you? How may I be of service to you? And
Yep.
then explained to me, that is not your train, sir. Your train is on the other platform. And I felt like the biggest jerk and was so humbled because his role in life is to ensure no one steps in front of that train.
Yep. and he will do it to the best of his ability. They're very rules-based, and I admire that.
Yeah,
They give
absolutely.
dedication to things.
Absolutely. I mean, we were at one point at McDonald's, I think it was like in the Takashita Street or something like that. And my wife had bought some sort of like dried apple or something, candied apple, and I had to go to the toilet. So I ducked in and they sat like at the most frontest table to the front door. And I went to the toilet, come back out. As I was sort of approaching the table to exit, one of the staff there, she used to come up with the arms crossed and she's like, I won't insult and try and do like a Japanese terrible accent, but she basically said, I'm really, really, really sorry to have to tell you this, but you cannot eat that food in our restaurant. And it'd be really great if you could just please leave. And I was like, I felt horrible and sorry that she had to say that. In Australia, it'd be just like, dude, you can't eat that here. Can you get out?
Well, things have changed too in Japan, I've noticed. So when I first went there and I was going through the arcades, I tried to take some pictures.
Right.
Because I was like, old-fashioned camera. It's digital, I think, but old-fashioned camera.
Yeah, look like a camera.
Yeah, and they'd say no photos in here. Yeah. Nowadays, you just go there and you see everyone taking photos, and I think it's because they adopted the mobile phones and they started taking photos and stuff.
Yeah, that's right. I know. I was going to say ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was trying to think. I might have told this story on the Play It Up podcast, but I rented a car and I was driving it around. It was a very nervous experience. Yeah, especially because the GPS kept yelling at me in Japanese, and I had no idea what it was saying half the time. And a police officer pulled me over while I was driving, and I thought, oh God, this is it.
What have I done?
But all he wanted to do was tell me, hey, up there on the left, there's some roadworks. Please go the other way. You don't know what you're doing here. So I was like, thank you so much. And you see the pictures of my son with the railway staff. I didn't stop those railway staff. If it's the ones I'm thinking, they were walking to get on the Shinkansen for their thing, and they saw my son, and they're like, let's put the hat on him, and let's just, beautiful. Take some photos and give him a good time. And I'm like, that's great.
Yeah, it's good. We had a similar sort of situation when we went to Disneyland in Japan. It's quite a big from where we were. It was quite a big day. There was like one train and then another train. And when we were sort of doing the connection, we kind of weren't quite sure. It's like there's all lines and colors and we were doing okay. And we kind of went up to a guy in a booth and we're like, we think we want to go here. Can you give us directions? And he kind of looked at us, he nodded, he got out, shut the booth, shut all these doors and windows and said, and he's like, follow me. And we're like, I hope it's not far. It's okay. He's good. It's okay. And he must have walked for like 10 minutes across those little weird train platform subways where it was like shops. And it was a Westfield shopping center underground all the way. Yep. And then he points some stairs and he said, you need to go up those stairs. Have a great day. And I'm like, dude, you're like in Australia. I'm not saying Australians are total jerks, but the guy would have went, just keep going that way. You can't miss it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just wanted to hug everybody. It's as close to being on another planet without actually leaving the planet. It's still your species. You still are on the same wavelength, but there's just enough difference to feel that you're having a really great adventure.
Yeah, and they're so accommodating in regards to the use of English there, I noticed that lately they've also added a third language. They've added Chinese to everything as well, because I'm guessing they get so many Chinese tourists.
Yeah, that's kind of a bit of a global thing as well, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, nowadays, I see vans driving around the streets with only Chinese things on them. So, the times change.
Yeah.
But I guess, if you're someone listening and you're going, well, I'd really like to go to Japan, but I'm nervous because, I don't speak the language or anything like that, you will be fine.
Yeah,
you will be able to get around.
100%.
No problems.
Yeah. You just, like you said, just learn some basics. Thank you, please. Uishi means delicious.
Exactly.
They love hearing that. Yep. It's just gratitude. It's not hard.
Just be respectful, like you would be anywhere, right? Just be respectful, like you would be.
just take it up a couple of notches.
Yeah. Maybe a bit more respectful than if you were in the US, but
yeah, that's right, or at home. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Look, I think anybody that's into gaming, especially retro gaming, is sort of going to have some sort of affinity for Japan. So any little information you can get from someone that's been there is, I think, if you're a smart traveler, you should appreciate any of this information.
Yeah.
So look, thanks so much for sharing what you've got to say about it. I gather, like, from a little bit of YouTube, I watched that, buying over there is changing. I mean, you can look at, I've watched a few of the YouTubers that do kind of like walking around with the camera buying stuff, and the average Game Boy over here on Facebook Marketplace is about $100, and you look at what they're picking up. Once you've done the conversion, it's about $100. So, but if you want to go over and buy the first 3 Rockmans for like $5 or $7 each, there's mountains and mountains of that stuff.
It's funny. It's funny. Last time I went, which now would be a couple of years ago because of COVID, I noticed that they're very astute now that much of their market comes from overseas, right? Like your Super Potatoes, for example, always
they're
knew
online
that
now.
They were marketing at the whales, right? You can buy online from them now.
Yeah, that's correct.
So you'll find that if you want Rockman, or you want something that people are looking for, those prices are fairly jacked up high nowadays, right? They'll be comparable, but what you'll notice is the condition they're in is much better.
Absolutely.
They're 99% of the time in a box, and that box is in pretty pristine condition.
Yeah.
But the trick, I think, is that as long as you're not going to Akihabara or Denden Town, there are still huge bargains to be had.
Yeah.
Because they're advertising these prices at the Westerners, right? If you are willing to go off the beaten path, and when I say off the beaten path, I don't even mean much off the beaten path. Like, if you just go get yourself a rail pass, and you jump on a train for 20 minutes, and instead of going to Nakano Broadway or Akihabara or something like that, you go out to one of the lesser known places. There'll be a book off or a hard off sitting right there, recycle center. And you walk into one of those, and you'll probably find it for a third of the price of what you're looking there. You'd still find a Saturn for $10,
Still be happy with it.
Yeah.
And you'll get the experience.
You just need to, yeah, exactly. You need to be a little bit more adventurous nowadays if you want to get a decent price. But I mean, the selection is still there. The quality of the product is still there. Like, if you want to buy a Game Boy Micro, right? Buy a Game Boy Micro on eBay here. It's probably not in the best condition. Go buy one there. The screen doesn't have a scratch on it. They've probably buffed it out. Yeah,
that's right. Awesome. All right, Matt. Well, look, thank you for all that. I'm always interested in people. The gaming is just an excuse to kind of get to know people, but it always astounds me, how similar everybody's journey really is. It's a bit like a sports match. There's the sideline, these are the rules, and everything has to be achieved within these parameters. But how everybody goes from their first Game Boy to 6th in the world Donkey Kong, or just has every NES cart, or whatever it is their own personal sort of feelings of success are within retro gaming. I think that's always the most exciting part. So thank you so much. I always sort of give my guests an opportunity to sort of maybe promote something they do, or other people in the community that they find are really supportive. I always find someone on Instagram that I want to promote. The person that, the content this time is Kurko Mods. I'll put this in the show notes. It's KURKO_mods. Now, this person describes themselves as a Banjo-Kazooie modder, an N64 enthusiast. It's a little kind of different to what I would normally recommend, because it have like daily renders. And this just seems to be some amazing sort of still animations of really great N64 characters. And I would say just have a look at it. And it's one of those things that comes up in my Instagram feed each day, very Nintendo heavy. And it just look at it like, oh, that's cool. And nice, there's Mario Tennis and Luigi's Mansion. So Wave Race 64. Just go and check these guys out, and you'll just get a little smile, and there's a little smile goes a long way each day. So I give you the opportunity now to, if there's anybody you want to have a chat about. It's a bit of an ambush, but sometimes you just, you've got someone you want to give thanks to.
There's there's so many people I'd like to give thanks to,
Yeah.
and the usual suspects like, my wife and my son and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, of
But
course.
mainly me. I'd like to thank me.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'll plug my Twitch channel if that's okay.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. That's what it's here for.
twitch.tv/Lyriel,
Yep.
which is LYRIELL. If you
All
want to
right.
come and watch a guy get angry at a random number generator, please do.
Yeah.
Swing by and say hi. If you know, want to get into Donkey Kong, you can ask me any kind of questions you want there. There's some wonderful people in the community there. Andrew Barrow, one of the greatest, classic arcade game players of all time. You should check him out. Or
Yeah.
Justin Elliott. They're both great Donkey Kong players and great people. If you're into podcasts, besides the wonderful podcast you're listening to right now, Retronauts is a great podcast.
Oh,
It's been running for
absolutely.
I don't know, maybe 10 years now in one form or another.
It's almost been my university listening to, Parish, and
yeah.
you learn so much. They go to that next point of just understanding the whys and accepting that, yes, this wasn't always great, but without it, we don't get greatness.
Yes.
Great, really great.
Jeremy Parish is a font of knowledge, and I'm not associated with that in any way, shape, or form. But if you love video games and the history of video games,
absolutely,
and you want to watch, someone who's played way too many block moving video games, what do they call them, Sokoban or whatever, over the years, check out his channels on YouTube or his podcast Retronauts. And I just shout out to anyone who loves playing games in this community. Do your best to be a good human being. Don't gatekeep. Don't be a fanboy. Share the love with everyone that you can.
You're missing out on things if you do any of those stuff. You're just missing out on 2/3 of other stuff. Cool.
Be a good human being and share the love of video games with everyone else. That's all I got to say.
Awesome. That's a really positive and fantastic note to end on, mate. And so thanks for your time this weekend. And even though people will hear this in a few weeks from the day we're recording this, but Kong Off is a week away, and you're good to go. There's a bit of COVID stuff going on, but you are good to go, and we will see you in a week. And even if you have to sit around for 2 weeks afterwards or something somewhere, you're going to be there. So I'll get to actually, like I said to you before, last Kong Off, I stood behind you and watched you play, and that sounds really creepy. But so did every other person in the bar that day. So, but I'm sure I come up and shake your hand and wish you luck and all that sort of thing.
That'd be great, mate. It would be great to meet you properly one-on-one, and I'll buy you a beer.
No, well, I'll buy you the beer. Let's do it that way.
I'm playing. Don't buy me one.
I can't drink in large crowds. I just get either a bit too chatty or a bit sleepy and taken advantage of. So I leave the drinking for my couch. All right, mate. Thank you so much. I'll see you in a week, and I'll see you around.
Take care, mate.
Yeah, you too.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.